Hey everyone, Justin here from the Hangfirepod with another episode of Stones Riffs, where we sit and riff about the Stones. Today I'm excited to chat with my guest, who is a fellow content creator here on YouTube, who has an awesome channel reviewing classic albums from her amazing vinyl collection. Her Vinyl Monday series are incredibly fun and informative and super great watches, and the links are in the description below. I'm excited to chat the Stones with Abigail Devoe. Abigail, hello!
Hi!
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, I'm super excited to talk to you. I've been a fan of your channel for the longest time, and it's super fun to see someone else so enthusiastic about, this kind of era of music, or just music in general, but especially music that you love, which is, for me, the Stones in the 70s and that kind of stuff. So it seems like it's been growing in a great way, your channel.
Yeah, I have not expected this growth at all. Bringing Vinyl Monday to YouTube was a complete accident. I wasn't supposed to be a vinyl YouTuber. That just sort of happened. So everything following this, for all intents and purposes, an accident. I'm not supposed to be here. Everything after that has been so cool to watch. I always say in the comments, I'm along for the ride just as much as the viewers are, and that's totally true.
Yeah, I think that resonates with people because there's something very exciting to see someone else, being exposed to this stuff for the first time, and you're seeing the excitement, happen and unfold, and that's pretty darn cool. You have so many different videos on your channel, different albums that you're reviewing of different genres and different artists, and I'm a big Beach Boys fan, so I caught some of those too, and of course, the Stones, and you had a couple Stones ones that I loved watching because a lot of them had to do with, one of them in particular had to do with an album that no one likes to see to talk about, but we'll get to that in a second. Before we do that, I'd love to hear your initial first exposures to the Stones. What were your first songs? What were your first albums? Or whatever it was that first entered your life as the Stones were kind of coming onto your radar?
All right, so I was sort of foreign to all of classic rock, not just the Stones, for a pretty long time. I don't really remember hearing the Stones until I was about 20. That's a long time to just be oblivious to that. I didn't really get into listening to the Stones until I started collecting vinyl. I sort of acquired this entire collection, and there happened to be a lot of Stones in it. This guy happened to be a blues guy. So I just got to listening to the greatest hits compilations that I had, and then into the studio records he had. And from that, I got to parse out sort of what I liked about the Stones and then move through my listening with that knowledge.
Wow, pretty cool. 20, that's not as late as you think, that seems to be just about right time where things line up, especially with, everyone has a different personality, but the Stones have a certain energy, in their music, just like any other band, I guess. And that sounds about right that, it's around that early part of life, I think, is definitely expected for everyone. I was just, 14, 15 for me, so just a little bit earlier. Do you remember the first songs that it made an impression on you during those years?
It was probably Paint It Black. I think that was it. I also remember really liking 19th Nervous Breakdown because it was doing some wacky surf stuff, and random, but Hey You Get Off My Cloud. I just really like that song.
What is it about Paint It Black that still works for a lot of people and worked for you when you first heard it?
At the time, I hadn't heard anything else like it. It's a pretty early use of sitar in rock music from what I know. And there's just this turbulent energy that song has, this sort of undercurrent propelling it forward. But it doesn't really feel stable as it moves. Like there is this forward momentum, but it's rickety. You don't know where this thing is going to go. And it just sort of spills off into that fade out. I remember that quality it had, that quality of unrest just really grabbed me.
Yeah, no, I totally feel you on that. It's so funny because for me, the first impressions I have of that song is this very exotic vibe. There's something kind of exotic about the melody. Ba da do da da dee do da do boo do do da. It's like, wait, is that Moroccan? Is that Egyptian? Is that Spanish? What is that melody? It's very un-American pop to me, So it's got that grittiness to it, and it's always been very provocative to me, and it's a very dark song. And there are very few songs that are dark are songs that you'd like to listen to again and again, because it's almost like, oh, it might make you uncomfortable or just make you a little bit uneasy, but there's such a mystery around that song that you can't help but listen to it.
Yeah, and Paint It Black doesn't put you in that weird headspace that other songs that carry a dark atmosphere do. Like, you can't just listen to The End by The Doors 5 times in a row. It's not going to work out great for you. You're going to have a pretty weird day after that. Starting off your day with like 3, maybe 4 passes of Paint It Black, I think that's a little better off.
That's hilarious. That's so true. Yeah, it's funny because for it being as dark as it is a little light on its feet in other ways. That it has this sustainability where you can go back to it and not feel like you're being burnt out on a particular energy or anything like that. Well, that's pretty cool. That's interesting. That I'm not surprised that. I wonder if there is a link between Paint It Black for you being so quite an impact for you, and then jumping over to something like a Goat's Head Soup, which is what caught my attention on your channel, was that you devoted a video on giving some love and shining a light, no pun intended, on Goat's Head Soup, which is an album that seems to be now maybe recently becoming more and more of a household name. But for the longest time, it was the easiest album to slag off. And I was so happy to see you seem to really enjoy it and you connected with it. Was it an album that kind of took you by surprise?
It did. I did not expect for Goat's Head Soup to ascend my Rolling Stones album ranking the way it did, because truly I didn't know what to expect from it. I'm familiar with this period in the Stones, but I wasn't familiar with Goat's Head Soup, probably because it was sort of one of the forgotten records from this really unstable period in Stones history. And I put this thing on, and there was just something about it similar to Paint It Black in the sense that it moves ahead of itself. If that makes any sense. It has this force about it and this undercurrent of darkness. I tend to gravitate towards darker, grittier records and sounds, and lesser composed, lesser finished ones. And Goat's Head has both of those qualities.
I'm so happy to hear you say that, especially about the unfinished element, because I think that's what may have, I wasn't around when this album came out, so I don't know the, direct impact on people, but all I know is in the following years, people were incredibly excited to dismiss it. I think anything that came after Exile on Main Street was gonna not be received well, and in many ways, it's the opposite of Exile on Main Street because of the reason you mentioned, where some of this stuff may be, quote, unfinished, and they're not necessarily compositions that look much on paper, what songs, the best songs usually look great on paper. Oh, the great lyrics, great chords, you can see these changes, the composition is there. But these are more like jams, at least some of them are. But Dancing with Mr. D, for example, once you get the record going, I've always been freaked out by this song. And the whole album is just fucking spooky.
Yeah. Yeah, again, that's something I really like about it.
First of all, I wonder if the artwork itself threw people off, because it's not a very, I don't know, it's a very provocative picture. I much prefer the alternate version that they put out. I don't know if they ever actually officially released it, but have you ever seen this guy?
I have. That was an insert in my copy. Hold on. What am I doing? I literally have this next to me because I anticipated this.
Yeah, I much prefer the actual goat's head. I mean, look how beautiful that is. That is
Freaky. But I mean, this is also a good shot. It's just, again, a little unsettling. It always read as womb-like to me.
uh-huh. Interesting. Yeah, I at the very least it lures you in and go, what's going on here? And and it's a trend with the Stones where they're always there to, divert your expectations. As they go from album to album, you almost kind of get in this trap of having expectations for this next album. And then people like, what the hell? What is this? And after this, well, I don't think Exile was necessarily received as legendary as it became, but, it seemed like Goat's Head was definitely a departure. And it's ironic that people would, slag it off considering it goes in that Jimmy Miller, Mick Taylor classic era. So what's the deal, people?
I think the deal is, like, even though the Stones are a pretty blues-based band at this time, they sort of took a big circle and returned back there, but the end of the circle where it closes just looked a little different on Goat's Head. I think, like, not everyone is comfortable with a super jammy record. Not everyone. You really got to pack your patience with some of this stuff. Sometimes it builds up the momentum. Sometimes it gets where it needs to go. Sometimes it becomes something really great. And other times, maybe just won't. You sort of have to give tunes that are structured like that a little bit of grace, have to have a little bit of patience with them. And some people listen to records that way, and some people just don't. It's an acquired taste.
Yeah, absolutely. And one last thing about this kind of characteristic of some of the songs on the album, because I don't want to make it sound like this album's like a Fish album or Grateful Dead live album where it's all jammy, but at the same time, there are things that are here that are sort of the best way to listen to them is if you kind of turn off your brain and turn on your body and dance to them. Something like Hide Your Love isn't something that doesn't necessarily rewards you if you were to get, write down every word of it and figure out, okay, what is this song about? It's more like a mood. And then you got Can You Hear the Music, which is literally like this tribal.
That is a weird one.
Yeah, totally. And I maybe it's best when you have a drink or something stronger to listen to this stuff because you kind of need to turn something else off and turn something else on.
Yeah, I can totally see that. It's interesting that you mentioned Can You Hear the Music because it sticks out so hard with the rest of the Goat's Head material. Like you were saying about Painted Black, Can You Hear the Music? It has this exoticism to it. And I'm not sure how it works with the rest of the record, honestly. It's just with the collection of songs they had, it could have been a better sonic fit, but with what they ended up with, Can You Hear the Music is something very different. I found myself going back and forth on that song a lot. Like, do I like this? Do I not?
Yeah, I get it.
It's some of this material, you just it's divisive. I will say that. It's very divisive. But there's also some numbers that really aren't so much, that weren't captured in the jam environment that I really, really love. Winter is my favorite Stones deep cut, maybe my favorite Stones song right now.
Yeah.
It was leftover, reworked from the Beggars Banquet sessions, I think. And it captures this magic. I struggled to find the words about it in my video, but it is this magic song.
Yeah, absolutely.
And romantic.
Totally. Wrap a coat around
but in like the sad romantic way that the Stones kind of like to do.
Well, that's a great point because Winter, I think, has a little bit of this vulnerability to it that isn't necessarily in a lot of Stones music. It's always very, macho and this kind of thing, and, whether that's an act, which obviously it is, but, it's obviously a big part of their music. So to hear them, have a little bit of like a sheepish, like I'll wrap a coat around you, loving warmth to it. You're like, oh, wow, this is a great side of you, Mick. And then you've got this majestic Mick Taylor solo that just takes you away.
And a really great string arrangement on that too.
Yeah, you're just flying by the time that part of the song comes up. That's a lot of fans love that song. I mean, it's just this hidden song that no one knew was there. Would you say it's the highlight of the album for you?
It's one of them for sure.
The other being Angie, right?
Like, it's funny to me that Angie was the hit, and it does have that same vulnerability, sensitivity that Winter does. It's a little more done up, and sometimes I struggle with very done up material. That's just how I am as a listener.
Yeah, no, totally, I get it. What would you say would have been a more appropriate lead single, you think, from the album instead of an Angie, or a song that should have got more love?
Heartbreaker. I don't know why they didn't lead with Heartbreaker.
Right. Oh, that Billy Preston kickoff at the top.
I knew it was him as soon as the song started.
Oh man, he's just fantastic. A funky, just great player, isn't he?
I like the Stones when they lean into the funk and the soul aspect. They wore that really well. Yeah, true, especially during this era. And maybe that's probably some of the friction that may have been caused to some of the fans, that now they were going into more funk and more looser things, and letting go of the country and American country and some blues, but Heartbreaker is a hell of a one. And it's a great, not a great story, but a little bit of a narrative there that's unfortunately relatable, I suppose. This kind of police terrible story was a murder. I don't think it's a real story, but it's a grim idea, and the Stones are really good with grim, aren't they? Yes.
Yeah, and I don't think the album as a whole is necessarily subject matter is grim, but sound wise, it just feels like it's got this film over the music.
It's got the film over it. I wrote this down in my notes, this really specific vignette that I feel Goat's Head Soup feels like. It's the end of the movie Heathers, where the bomb has just gone off and Winona Ryder is like staggering out, and this girl goes, "You look like hell," and she says, "I just got back." That is Goat's Head Soup, the just getting back, and like the head of the beast is in their fist. Like, we came out of these really bad years to be a Rolling Stone, and we mostly came out in one piece. We're definitely not the same. We're a lot older now, maybe a little wiser, and the world isn't as simple anymore. That's Goat's Head Soup.
I love that. Yeah, that says a lot. That it's a statement that I'm probably one of their first of many statements of being survivors in a way of their own legend or just the music business or whatever. But they've had so many transitions over the years. When you think, how are they going to get out of this one? They pull something magical out. But yeah, so I was mightily impressed that you wanted to spend some time on Goat's Head Soup, because I thought that was such a special album that people, I think, are coming around to. And videos like yours is what's making people go, holy shit, there's something here. Where were we all this time?
I really like when my videos make people reevaluate some music they hadn't really grabbed them before. And even if they revisit and it still doesn't grab them, that's fine too. I respect people even more when they're like, I still don't like this.
Yeah, and I think people appreciate being challenged and being reminded of stuff. And it seems to me that with music, it's all about the time in which you listen to something. So something that may not be clicking when you heard it the first time, the seed has been planted. It's all about watering it, and hopefully down the line you listen to it back and this has sprouted into something else now. Yeah, so it's totally valuable to go back and listen to something that you didn't think you liked before, which leads me to another controversial album in the Stones catalog, which I'm very excited to talk to you about because you also spent some time with this album, their Satanic Majesty's Request. Now, what made you look into this one, Abby?
What made me look into this one, that was the first episode of Vinyl Monday on YouTube, by the way. I kicked off this crazy thing with Satanic Majesties, and I think that was a great launching off period because it's the Psych Stones album, even if there were traces of Psych before and after it. This is definitely the most potent stuff, and there's just so much to talk about. This is a well and truly wacky record. A lot of ideas, maybe half of them were followed through. But again, some great songs in the mix.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. I think for the longest time this was not on my radar, and in the last maybe 5 years or so, I've started to take it more seriously because whether you like it or not, the Stones did work on this album. It's not like it just fell out of the blue. It's the AI didn't come up with this album. They wrote this.
Yeah, they worked on it for so long that their label was like, okay, guys, we need to put this out at some point. You just got to hand in what you have.
Exactly. And so that was one of the reasons I wanted to kind of spend more time with it. And, at the very least, I have a lot of good things to say, and like you, probably some mixed things. But at the very least, it's absolutely fascinating to listen to this stuff because it's the Stones. Like, you've maybe kind of heard them, but, you're never going to hear them again like this.
Yeah. Yeah, they totally abandoned that after Satanic Majesties. They were like, okay, that train of thought, how about no? We're gonna go back to this stuff now. We're gonna go back to our comfort zone.
Right, absolutely. And I was just talking to a fan last week about it, and they said, "What do you think of Majesty's Request?" And already I could sense in the voice was like, you don't like that, do you? And I could say, well, it's so easy to not like it, especially if you're coming from, the rootsy stuff of the Stones. It's the blues and the country and R&B and, the black influences.
Yes.
Stuff, and you're like, this is so foreign to me. But it's like looking through a kaleidoscope that the Stones designed. Like, how could you not be intrigued by this stuff?
Yes, and it's a very Brian forward record too. He played every instrument under the sun, and the Stones used just about every instrument he could play on that record. He was probably the most psychedelic of the Stones, not just in dress, but in the sounds that he liked and the sounds that he played and the music he would come up with. I do wish the Stones had gotten just kind of one more record in that direction to spotlight Brian's role as a Stone, because really everything changes after he leaves.
Yeah, really. And I know that you're also a big Beach Boys fan and a Beatles fan. And so I think for me, and I am as well. So all that baggage is applied for me here when I talk about my interest and curiosity to hear the Stones do this, because those elements and those kind of experiments are happening in perhaps more successful ways, for lack of a better word, with those other bands, the Beatles and the Beach Boys, to name two out of many, many of the time. So it's kind of interesting to hear the Stones try their hand at this and get these results. It's such Stones results.
Yeah, it is Psych filtered through a Stones lens to varying degrees of success, but like much respect to them for going out on a limb and trying something they maybe weren't totally comfortable with yet.
What were your favorite moments from the album?
Sing This All Together, but like the long 7-minute track. No one likes that one but me.
Good for you.
It's a total stream of consciousness, and I think those moments in music are really cool.
Yeah, totally. Well, good for you. Wow. I thought you'd start with the first one that starts off the album, at least the one with Lennon and McCartney on it. singing backup. But no, that other one is way more challenging. And talk about a jam. That one's a little bit very experimental. Yeah. And then you've got, the two songs I think, I see that's the thing people talk about.
And She's a Rainbow is gorgeous. 2,000 Light Years from Home. I love that one.
Oh, yeah. That's exactly what I was about to say, is that how can you dislike an album that brought you to those two songs? You could say, oh, that's a dumb album, get rid of it. Like, get rid of it, but you're getting rid of some two important songs. I don't know, there's something about 2,000 Light Years from Home, because to me, even still, it sounds like, people say this phrase often, and I can't take it literally, but there's something to it for this song where I can say, it kind of sounds like it was recorded yesterday, at least in terms of its ideas and its presentation. There's something about it that makes you go, yeah, obviously it's 60s weird and kitsch, and there's something about the quality of that recording that makes you go, oh, that's still something that I could see people today even want to do. But She's a Rainbow is just gorgeous.
It's for how there are sonic cliches of Psych. There absolutely are that very much date the music. But 2,000 Light Years doesn't really have those. It's oddly relevant.
Yeah.
And I made a little face earlier because I don't know if I should be saying this, but I do kind of prefer it to A Day in the Life.
Oh, now we're talking. I love it. That's fantastic. Wow.
I am aware that it's a flaming hot take.
You want to show your Beatles pin while you're on this topic?
Oh, and I have all of my Beatles prints behind me.
That's totally right. Well, they're both going in the same area, of like, you think you know where you are on Earth, but you're not. You're somewhere else. It kind of fractures your train of thought and your presence, and 2,000 Light Years, I think, goes further out than A Day in the Life, or because to me, I've said that 2,000 Light Years from Home is like the Stones' Good Vibrations.
Okay.
It's like it's pushing. It's out there. You're in this.
Gets a little intergalactic. You float in space a little, but A Day in the Life is a lot more grounded on Earth.
Very much so. Yeah, but it does take its chances as well, but in more grounded here. But I love that connection for you that you wanted to put those two songs. But they all are that class, aren't they? Every band has that one song. It's like, oh, they're all that class they've got that weird badass song.
The weird. I like that. I like that term a lot.
Yeah, we're all attracted to that kind of thing. I'm so happy to hear that, She's a Rainbow. I mean, it's irresistible. It's like, Ruby Tuesday from Between the Buttons era is also one of those hooks, which are surprisingly, Keith-driven songs that he kind of put together. And people are surprised that here's this rocker, the blues guy, the Chuck Berry maniac.
The persona of the entire band. Where you're when you're first getting into the Stones, you're like, wait, this big personality is a backing guitarist? This Keith Richards rhythm guitar. At first, it does not make sense. At least for me, it didn't.
Yeah. Brian Jones sort of is the MVP of this album, in many ways. And yeah, it's a shame that things start to crumble at this point soon after for him. In some ways, but it would have been interesting to see if they would have ended up with another like Smile for the stuff. For like the Beach Boys have a Smile, like they wanted to put everything crazy into this one album, and Brian couldn't put it together. You wonder what the Stones could have done if they have gotten what they started with, in my opinion, Between the Buttons and Satanic Majesty's Request, and like, okay, let's do one more go at this, but really tighten it up. Would have been a thought.
I mean, some of those elements were retained for Beggar's Banquet. Some. But you're talking like full-fledged in that direction. That, you're right, that definitely could have been cool to see.
What do you make of people, before we move on from this area, of people wanting so desperately to connect, speaking of the Beatles, their Satanic Majesty's Request to Sgt. Pepper's?
I see there is some grounds for comparison because very, very late in the process, the Stones went ahead with a stage show concept they couldn't really follow through on, unfortunately, because it was so late in the process. But other than that, I've just never seen them as comparable, especially with the whole Stones copying the Beatles thing. That just, when you look at the timeline of Satanic Majesty's production, it does not make sense.
Right. I mean, they were in the studio for a lot of that time. And, just the content alone.
Well, they were either in the studio or the courthouse.
That's exactly right. Yeah, they had a lot of things on their mind. 67 was a disastrous year, for them.
Not more of a disaster than 69.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, my God. Goat's Head Soup is looking pretty impossible at this point. Like, talk about getting on the other side of all that. I mean, they really went through the mill with some punishment, right, during those years. I was like, oh, yeah, well, with the Satanic Majesty's Request, people love to pin those up with Sgt. Pepper. I mean, first of all, for me, I think the comparison starts and ends with the cover. It really just like, okay, the cover, you can see echoes of each other. Okay, but have you pressed play?
Because weren't they photographed by the same guy?
Yeah, photographed by the same guy. I don't have his name off the top of my head, but it was designed by different gentlemen. I don't believe the photographer actually came up with the actual layout and what the contents of the photograph would be.
That's true.
So someone else came up with that idea. But in terms of content, this is a very dark, spooky, again, dark, other side of the joyous and playful thing that Sgt. Pepper's was. So I don't see the thread there. Again, besides what? They were both experimental, but so was everyone else. Everyone was taking acid on the top.
Yeah, and I think what intrigues me about the darker side of Psych is, like, of course that happened. Being on a lot of acid kind of causes existential dread. Who would have thought?
Good point. That's a great point. And you mentioned a funny observation in your video that I'm not big into Psych, so I don't know how prevalent this trend is, but you mentioned that these medieval ideas seem to...
Yes.
Is that true?
Yeah, there's this sort of Baroque and medieval thing that found a home in Psych pretty easily. A very colorful home. It's all very eccentric, but they just sort of made sense together. I think you got that with visual art first, and then it trickled its way into the music.
Yeah, that's interesting. I can't wait when I get into that area of music, I'll probably think back to this conversation. Yeah, Abigail was right. There are medieval ideas everywhere, which seems like I'm going to be watching a lot of Monty Python around the same time too, or something. It seems like
Holy Grail, funded by Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin.
I did not know that. That's interesting.
You didn't?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, Floyd, or was it Zeppelin? One of them, I think it was Floyd, was watching so much Monty Python in the studio that when they heard Monty Python was having trouble funding their next film project, and also for tax reasons, they threw money at the project.
Oh, that's amazing. What is it with these bands and tax problems? Before we leave the Satanic Majesty's area, I wondered if you could, this is a challenge for you. How would you try to get a person who's never been into the album, who's maybe a fan of the classic stuff and maybe even a fan of Goat's Head Soup? These are albums that are not reachable for some people. But if you were to convince a Stones fan, at the very least, to give their Satanic Majesty's Request a chance, what kind of things should they look out for?
That is a really tough question.
Is it just the fascination of hearing the Stones do this? There are actually some songs that remind you of classic Stones, like Citadel, for example, is like, holy shit, that's a riff.
That's a place to start. I'd say, like, Citadel and 2000 Light Years are maybe the best places to start, and you just got to keep an open mind through the whole thing, because we're going to be going through a lot of ups and downs. It's going to be a pretty wild ride. Buckle up.
You're exactly right. I think that's probably the disclaimer we should probably put out, is that go through the album, but be able to parse things out, and pick and choose what you want. It's almost like a buffet, where you just go, I like this, I like that, I like this.
Yeah, things are going to get a little silly.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing that rubbed me one way, was that I found some of it to be very self-indulgent, and just go, okay, they're enjoying, well, whatever that they're enjoying and putting it to tape. And there's no guarantee that we're going to enjoy it, but hey, look at this, evidence A here. You enjoy the longer version of Sing This All Together, which is, absolutely controversial and experimental. Before we wrap up complete, I'd love to get your takes on some nerdy Stones questions that I was thinking about recently that I think, it'd be great to hear Abigail's point of view on certain things.
All right, let's go.
Well, part of the Stones' mystique, I suppose, and their legend is their branding for, I hate to use a cliche, but, their logo has been so prevalent over the years. And I'm a sucker for it, and I love that my friends, whenever they spot the Stones logo anywhere, it's like the bat signal or something, like, oh, they think of me. Like, oh, is Justin around? And I'm so, it warms my heart that people will send me pictures like, Justin, I saw this and I thought of you. And I'm a sucker for it. I think it's so representative of them, and it's a very fun idea, but I never really want to think about why it seems to match them so well. Do you feel like it's a great symbol for the band? It seems like in many ways it is. But
it was a great image, or it is a great image, because they're still using it. And it's relevant through so much of the music. It's very pop art. It's pop art. It is easily recognizable, easily identifiable. It works with the vibe of so much of the music, which for a good chunk of it is hardcore rock and roll. You don't get much more of a rock and roll logo than that.
Yeah, I think what comes off is what you're saying is there's a rebellion to it.
Yes, thank you for that. Yeah, it's a rebellion, sticking your tongue out like a petulant child.
Yeah, and you're right. That is what rock and roll is. I mean, rock and roll is probably one of many things, but one of them is, that's what I think of your rules.
And it still works. It still works even when you're a band of 80-year-olds and you're still rock and rolling. I'm pretty sure Keith is going to keep doing this until they have to haul him off the stage in his coffin. And there's a certain defiance to still doing what you love after you're supposed to stop, or you're supposed to calm down.
Yep, absolutely right. And you're exactly right. I didn't connect it to current terms, but that's exactly what's happening, is that everyone's saying, get off the stage, enough, and it's like, well, fuck you. Here we are. We're not going anywhere. So it's a very handy logo to have. It seems like they'll always need it to retort back to the naysayers. Okay, next question. Say you had to introduce the Rolling Stones to a new generation of music fans. What song, you only had to pick one, you can pick two if you want, that represents them and sums them up best?
Let's see, if a great initiation song would be, Satisfaction is a little cliche, so I'm going to go 19th Nervous Breakdown, because it does that great surf thing.
Talk about that song. What is it about that song that tickles you?
Gosh, the more you listen to the lyrics, the meaner they get.
Oh.
But it's got a great groove. It's great playing from Charlie. Charlie was a great drummer. He was the perfect drummer for the Stones. And this dialogue between Keith and Brian. The two guitarist thing has always been a fixture of the Stones. No matter who the two guitarists are, there's always two, and they're interplaying off each other. And I just for some essential Stones, an essential point to the Stones music that I don't think people recognize, because, you know, Mick J, one of the best rock and roll frontmen of all time, that is a personality, but you also have some really intriguing, interesting, smart stuff going on behind him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm so glad to hear you, give some props on the lyrics.
But that's only my honorable mention, actually. I think Roll This Joint is a great place to start.
Rip This Joint.
Rip This Joint, sorry.
Yeah, but
I was on the tip of my tongue, but I knew it was on Exile on Main.
I'll sign up with Roll This Joint. I'm always up for that. That's for sure. That's one of their fastest songs. One of their fastest top 2 songs. The fastest BPM.
Really?
Yeah. I believe Keith's labeled that was their fastest, and maybe the song from their 1997 album Bridges to Babylon, the song Flip the Switch, might have eclipsed it in terms of beats per minute by maybe 1 or 2. But yeah, you're looking at top speed Stones there.
Yeah, Rip This Joint does a Chuck Berry thing. It does an early foundational rock and roll thing, and that's really where the Stones kind of nestled in and made their home. And of course, like, people love Exile, but there's a lot of stuff going on Exile. It's sort of a patchwork of an album. Then why don't people like Goat's Head Soup? Because it's the exact same way. Okay.
But smaller.
But a lot more concise. And Rip This Joint is really bite-sized and has great replay value.
Nicely put. And I see a link there between Rip This Joint and 19th Nervous Breakdown, because there is this wonderful competition between Mick Jagger and Charlie Watts, because Mick has got quite a job to spit out all these lyrics, on both those songs. But I'd like to read a couple lines from 19th Nervous Breakdown, because believe it or not, Mick Jagger is on record as dismissing the lyrics to 19th Nervous Breakdown. I think someone may have brought it up and said, oh, Dylan-esque and blah, blah. And he said, oh, it's rubbish. But listen to this stuff. I mean, we're talking like, you're the kind of person you meet at certain dismal, dull affairs. Center of a crowd, talking much too loud, running up and down the stairs. Well, it seems to me that you have seen too much in too few years. And though you've tried, you just can't hide. Your eyes are edged with tears. Hey, pretty good, I say.
Mick J has such strange Stones opinions.
You're right.
He doesn't like the records that I like.
No, you're exactly right. Because he's too calculating. He can be a little bit too much in his own way, where he can kind of try to overthink things. But you're right. I mean, some of the stuff that just hits.
Honestly, the power and pitfall of having a persona.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, and Mick's got one hell of one to wrestle with. Yeah. Well, a couple more questions, if we might here. How about if you could spend a day with I guess dead or alive, who would you spend a day with from the band The Rolling Stones, and what would you do with this said person?
Man, Keith Richards fascinates me. He is one of my favorite personalities in all of rock and roll, because his reputation precedes him. He has quite the reputation and just this bonkers persona. I just want to sit and chat, and because the guy behind the persona has got to be super chill and just a lot of interesting, insightful things to say. I wouldn't exactly call him articulate, but I would gather some insight from that.
Yeah.
I'm not a Jan Wenner. I don't need to surround myself with exclusively articulate people. Janis Joplin wasn't articulate. Okay, buddy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I'm with you. That's the person I think I would choose too. Is Keith would be the fun hang. He would be the guy who'd be up for anything, and I just want to jam with the guy. I think I'd love to jam with him on Beast of Burden or something like that. But yeah, no, good choice. And finally, here as we wrap up, the Stones, they've got a new album coming out later in the month, and they're kind of in the news and they're around again. It makes you wonder, especially when you see that their new song had, at the time of this recording, about 16, 17 million hits on YouTube or something for the song Angry. So it's like, oh, it's kind of cool that people are still responding to the Stones. So it got me thinking, and I'd love to ask you, what do you suppose is it about the Stones' music that makes them survive? That even after all these years, as a 61-year-old rock and roll band, people are like, yeah, what are they up to? Let's see what they're up to. Click. It's amazing.
It's a combination of image and, one of their greatest strengths in my eyes is one of their pitfalls is that they are a singles band. They know how to sling out a single. There are some artists out there who just don't know how to pick singles for themselves, or maybe their management they can't really boil the frog down into one really great moment from the album to expose to the public. The Stones have very rarely had that issue. Really, the only time was Angie as the lead single to Goat's Head.
Your favorite song?
I don't hate the song. Honestly, I don't hate it. But to have so many great moments in the pop culture lexicon, these 2 or 3 minute songs that stick with a listener, to be able to craft that, I think, is a lost art. To be able to craft that is an underappreciated art too. But it also means that your singles are so good that the rest of the album can sometimes fall to the wayside. Or maybe listeners, take the radio stuff and say, this is good for me. I don't know if I need the rest of the album. I promise you do.
Yeah, because in a way, it's almost like the Stones have always been many bands in one, right? But in the best sense, it's like you've got the persona of what they do in their singles, but then the stuff that's on the albums is a more textured, interesting side that people seem to just have no appetite for, or just don't have no patience for, or don't know how to listen. It's very strange, but like you say, it's the other side of the coin.
The singles are the persona, and the album material is the person.
Oh, beautifully. Nicely put.
It gets more human when you put on the LP.
Absolutely. Fantastic. I love that. Well, on that note, on this fantastic high note, this was a great thrill, Abigail, to sit with you and talk to another person who kind of gets it and has the same love for the Stones. And I can't wait to see more Stones stuff coming from you. Are you going to be venturing out to the 70s and the 80s? I can't wait for you to review the new Hackney Diamonds album that's coming out. Well, when will that be? Like another 10 years maybe?
At the rate at which I work, probably. I cover so many bands that it takes a long time for me to get back around to things. I started the series with Satanic Majesties in May of 2022, and then I didn't get back around to them until September of that year. Didn't get back around to them again for a while after that. Like, I've only covered the Stones 4 times. That was kind of my mistake, underrepresenting them a little early. If I could restructure the series, that would be one of the things I changed. But Beggar's Banquet is turning 55 in December. And I can't wear the same Keith Richards getup for 3 videos. That would just be boring. I promise I have other Keith getup that needs to see the light for this. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
not in the near future, but we still got a few months and some pretty big projects to get through.
Yeah. No, I bet you keep very busy, and every one of them is worth the wait. But yeah, I definitely have my eye out. And maybe next time we'll talk about the Beach Boys compared to the Stones. They both have vast catalogs. That would be interesting to see.
Oh, yeah.
I'll tell everyone before we go where to find you, Abby.
All right. So you can find me at youtube.com/Abigail Devoe, or if you type Vinyl Monday into your YouTube search bar, I'm going to come up. I'm going to come up a lot. It's weird seeing so much of my face on one search results page. I honestly don't like it. I am on Instagram as Abigail Devoe. That's where I post the 60-second versions of Vinyl Monday, which is how this series started. I started with the bite-sized content and then went long form. So you can get your bite-sized Vinyl Monday if maybe you're not a big fan of the record, but you still want to see what's going on in the series. You can find that on Instagram or now on TikTok. I've finally begun posting these things to the Quack app. You yelled at me enough, so I did it. And that's where you can find me.
Fantastic. Well, Abby, thank you so much. Hope we can do this again.
Thank you so much.